Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Macbeth Act 3, Scene 2. So let's start with a quick plot summary where we will see that tides have started to turn. So the scene opens with a conversation between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and this conversation feels quite tense and quite difficult. It is clear from what Lady Macbeth says that Macbeth has been keeping himself away from her, that they've been isolated from one another. She asks why he keeps himself alone all the time, and there's this sort of sense of a slight disconnect between them in the way that they're talking. Macbeth confides in Lady Macbeth that he is really struggling mentally, and that there's a real kind of sense of his own kind of mental anguish and his torment. Very famous line, "Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife." And really, the thing that is worrying him, upsetting him, causing him to have such sleepless nights is the notion of Fleance and Banquo, and the fact that they're not safe in their position. So it's a real continuation of the previous scene. But the one difference is that we know as the audience that he is plotting to have Banquo and Fleance killed by the murderers. That's what we just saw in the last scene. Now, Lady Macbeth doesn't know that. And the way that Macbeth is talking to her about it suggests that he is keeping secrets from her. He is not allowing her insight into his plans. So he's willing to tell her that he is struggling and he is troubled, but he's not willing to tell her what the plans are. So there's a real kind of sense of change, of transition here in the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. We're going to move on now and have a little look at some quotations that demonstrate to us how Macbeth is feeling. So let's have a little look at the first one. So he says this to Lady Macbeth quite early on in the scene. "We have scorched the snake, not killed it." Now, this is obviously a metaphor that we're dealing with here. Now, the snake, this is quite interesting. So the snake is like the danger. And by scorching the snake rather than killing it, he's saying, well, we're not out of danger yet. So actually, the notion of the snake, even though it feels a little bit ironic because snakes are often kind of associated with evil, and he's presenting actually the rightful king, Duncan, Malcolm, Donalbain, as the snake. But the point is he's saying that they haven't yet done enough to feel safe. This is quite a troubling line here. He says that it would be better to be with the dead whom we, to gain our peace, have sent to peace, than on the torture of the mind to lie in restless ecstasy. He is saying here that he would rather be dead than suffer the kind of torment and anguish that he is going through right now. I think there's this idea about how they've carried out a murder to get peace. The irony there is that that's the last thing that's happened. They've lost their sense of peace. And we've also got this inclusive pronoun here, whom we. So again, it's that reminder of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth having been in on it together in the earlier murder. It was them together, and now we're moving to Macbeth acting in a more solitary nature. And I think this it's almost an oxymoron here, this restless ecstasy. The idea, it's kind of like, to use a very modern day expression, it's kind of like having busy head. That's what he's saying. He's saying that his busy head is torturous, and actually he would much rather be where Duncan is, at peace, than alive and living with this constant sense of fear. And those fears and anxieties are so perfectly summed up in this metaphor. "Full of scorpions is my mind." And Shakespeare's using this thing called hyperbaton here, where he changes the order of the words for emphasis. So rather than saying, "My mind is full of scorpions," he swaps it around. "Full of scorpions is my mind." It places emphasis on the actual image of the metaphor here. Now, again, think about the connotations of this image. You could call it zoomorphic metaphor if you wanted here, because it's in relation to a scorpion. But the idea of the stress, the pain, the suffering, the fact that it's full of scorpions. It's not just one stinging him. His brain is absolutely packed full of these of these creatures metaphorically. So it really shows just how much sort of suffering he is in at this moment. We can also see in this scene the way that the relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth appears to be changing in status, inequality. There is almost like a role reversal occurring in this scene. So Macbeth tells Lady Macbeth, "Let your remembrance apply to Banquo, present him eminence both with iron tongue and make our faces visits to our hearts, disguising what they are." Now that sounds exactly like what Lady Macbeth said to Macbeth about Duncan, look like the time. When she says, "Look like the innocent flower, sorry, but be the serpent under it." So he's echoing her words, but now it's him that's in charge. And what's particularly interesting is when you look at it in relation to the end of the scene where she asks him what he's planning on doing, because he says that there's going to be this deed of dreadful note that will occur. And when she asks him, he says, "Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, till thou applaud the deed." So we've got imperatives in both of these quotes. He's giving orders, so he's the one in charge. And again here, be innocent of the knowledge. He's saying outright, I don't want to tell you. But it's not just about omitting. We know, dramatic irony, we know that Macbeth is going to have Banquo killed before the feast. Yet he is saying to Lady Macbeth, when Banquo's at the feast later, be kind to him. Don't let him see that there's any concern or that I'm frightened. So it's not just about keeping her innocent of the truth. It's not just about omitting the truth. He's telling her outright lies here. So we've got an inversion in roles. He's now the one in charge. He's the one using imperatives, but he's also keeping her in the dark, not telling her the truth. And just our last quote to consider here before we have our final thoughts. Again, with this idea of sounding like other characters. I know that Macbeth has obviously used a lot of language to do with dark and light. It's something that has run all the way through. But when he says, "Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day, and with thy bloody and invisible hand cancel and tear to pieces that great bond which keeps me pale," he sounds like Lady Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5, when she called upon the murdering ministers, when she asked the darkness to envelop her so that she wouldn't be able to see, or the knife wouldn't be able to see, the keen wounds that it makes. So again, we've got the idea of using imperatives to address the night, slightly personified. We've got this metaphor here of scarfing up the eye of the pitiful day. So again, it's asking for darkness to take over once more. And here, the personification of the night is extended with thy bloody and invisible hand, cancel and tear to pieces that great bond. Now you've got to ask, what is that great bond? It's his relationship with Banquo. He's saying, I need it to be dark, I need it to be night. I need night to do this, to rip up the friendship that we have, because at the moment that is keeping me pale. So he knows that he needs to obliterate any kind of relationship, any friendship, any softness with Banquo, so that he can carry out the deed. Sounds just like Lady Macbeth wanting to block up the passages of remorse. And our final thoughts. Okay, so it's quite a short scene, but it is so powerful. It really packs a punch. Obviously, the continuation of the theme of fear running through this, further plots of death, but it's when we really start to see Macbeth's anguish, his mental turmoil and struggle with his own fear and anxiety, feelings of insecurity about his own power. And then the other reason that this is so important is because it is the first time that we have seen this distancing that is going on between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. If you compare it back to Act 1, Scene 5, when she was reading that letter and he called her, the dearest partner of his dearest partner of greatness, and there was that real sense that he wanted to confide in her as quickly as possible. Now he's keeping her at arm's length. He's keeping himself alone. He's isolating himself from her and vice versa. So that's a real change. Okay, hopefully that was useful to you. If you have any questions or any comments, just please write me a little note in the comment sections and I will get back to you. But otherwise, for now, please subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll just say thank you for watching and happy revising.